In the days when the Persian Empire ruled the world, when King Ahasuerus reigned from India to Ethiopia, there lived a young Jewish girl whose courage would change history. Her name was Esther. She was not born into royalty. She had no army. She had no power. But she had faith. And sometimes faith is stronger than any throne. This is not just a story of a queen. This is a story of God's invisible hand working behind the scenes to save his people. This is the story of Esther.
King Ahasuerus was a powerful ruler. His palace in Susa was filled with gold, marble, and riches beyond imagination. One day, the king decided to show his greatness to the nobles and officials of his empire. He hosted a grand feast that lasted 180 days. Wine flowed freely, music echoed through the palace, pride filled the air. On the final day of the feast, the king, drunk with wine and power, called for Queen Vashti. He commanded her to appear before the guests, to show her beauty as a trophy of his glory. But Queen Vashti refused. She chose dignity over display. The king's face burned with anger. His advisers warned him, "If the queen disobeys, other women will follow her example. Your authority will be questioned." So the king made a cruel decision. Queen Vashti was removed from the throne. The crown was empty, and the empire began searching for a new queen.
Among the people living in Susa was a Jewish man named Mordecai. He had raised his cousin Esther as his own daughter, for she had lost both her parents. Esther was young, kind, and beautiful, but more than her appearance, she carried a quiet strength. When the king's officials gathered young women for the palace, Esther was taken, not by choice, not by ambition. She entered a world of luxury that hid danger beneath silk and gold. Mordecai warned her, "Do not reveal that you are Jewish." So Esther remained silent about her identity. Night after night, young women were presented to the king. Many were forgotten. But when Esther stood before Ahasuerus, something changed. The king favored her above all others. He placed the royal crown upon her head. Esther, the orphan girl, became Queen of Persia. But she had no idea that her greatest test was yet to come.
At the king's gate sat Mordecai. Nearby walked a man named Haman, a proud and powerful official. The king commanded that everyone bow to Haman. Everyone bowed, except Mordecai. Not because he was disrespectful, but because he would bow to God alone. This refusal ignited a fire of hatred in Haman's heart. But Haman did not want to destroy Mordecai alone. He wanted to destroy all the Jews. Haman cast lots, called Pur, to choose a day for destruction. Then he approached the king with lies. "There is a certain people scattered in your kingdom. They do not obey your laws. It is not in your interest to tolerate them." The king, careless and trusting, gave Haman his royal seal. The decree was sent across the empire. On a single day, every Jew, young and old, men, women, and children, would be killed. The city of Susa was thrown into confusion, but the Jews wept.
When Mordecai heard the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and cried loudly in the city. Esther heard of Mordecai's distress. She sent clothes for him, but Mordecai refused. Instead, he sent a message. "Do not think that because you live in the palace, you alone will escape. If you remain silent at this time, relief will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. and who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther was afraid. No one could approach the king without being summoned. The penalty was death. Yet she knew the truth. Silence would not save her. So Esther sent her reply.
"Gather all the Jews. Fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. I will go to the king, and if I perish, I perish."
After 3 days of fasting and prayer, Esther put on her royal robes. Her heart pounded as she stepped into the king's court. The room fell silent. The king looked at her. Time stood still. Then the king raised his golden scepter. Esther lived. "What is your request, Queen Esther?" he asked. "It shall be given to you." Esther did not rush. She invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, the king asked again, but Esther waited. She invited them to a second banquet. That night, God began to move. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered the royal records to be read. There he discovered something shocking. Years earlier, Mordecai had saved the king's life by exposing an assassination plot. But Mordecai had never been rewarded. The next morning, Haman entered the court, planning to ask permission to hang Mordecai. But the king asked Haman, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Thinking it was himself, Haman described royal robes, a horse, and public honor. Then the king said, "Do exactly so for Mordecai the Jew." Haman's pride was shattered. The man who planned death was forced to honor his enemy. At the second banquet, the king asked Esther one final time, "What is your request?" With courage trembling in her voice, Esther said,
"If I have found favor, let my life be spared, and my people's, for we have been sold to destruction."
The king demanded, "Who is responsible?" Esther pointed.
"This wicked man, Haman."
Haman trembled. The king stormed out in rage. When he returned, Haman had fallen at Esther's feet begging for mercy. The king misunderstood his actions, and Haman was sentenced to death on the very gallows he built for Mordecai. The king gave Esther Haman's estate. Mordecai was elevated to power. A new decree was issued, allowing the Jews to defend themselves. On the day meant for their destruction, the Jews prevailed. Their sorrow turned to joy, their fasting turned to feasting, and the festival of Purim was established to remember how God saved his people. The book of Esther never mentions God's name, yet his fingerprints are everywhere. In sleepless nights, in delayed answers, in quiet courage, Esther reminds us, you may feel small, you may feel hidden, but God has placed you where you are for such a time as this. When courage rises, deliverance follows, and when faith steps forward, God makes a way.